The goals that Trump has with tariffs, one is he uses the tariffs as a threat. So he tells another country, I'll put a tariff on you unless you do X, Y, or Z for the United States. Number two is tariffs are a tax. The U.S. has a huge budget deficit. He says, we'll collect more tax. Third, he says that tariffs will rebuild the American industry. There's a fourth reason as well, specifically with regard to China, and that is in the first administration, Trump put tariffs on China. This was to try to harm China's economy. None of this is good economics. None of this is likely to work. For China, for example, the threats don't mean very much because the U.S. market, while significant, is not so important strategically for China. The U.S. is a relatively small and shrinking part of the Chinese export direction. Even for Canada and Mexico, the threats don't work well because they generate nationalism, they generate a negative response. This harms the United States in its foreign policy. When it comes to revenues, not much is going to be raised in revenues. Remember, the American political system, we call it a pay-for-play system. Rich people give money, and then they get the policies that they want. You could also call it a very corrupt political system, which I do. And so the idea is there will be tax cuts for the rich, and then the poorer people will pay tariffs. The tariffs will never generate much revenue, period. Then when it comes to building industry, you don't build industry through protectionism. We will get outmoded industry. We will not get competitive industry. The United States will be high cost behind a tariff wall. It was a mistake for Britain to become protectionist at the end of the 19th century, and it's a mistake for the United States to become protectionist now. Unilateralism means that one country takes actions irrespective of the wishes of the other country and without diplomacy. So the biggest problem is not only the protectionism, but actually the unilateralism. There's even a name for it, sovereigntists. Sovereigntists are nationalists who say, as a sovereign nation, we do what we want. In the U.S. mindset, reaching an agreement with another country is a sign of weakness. In Confucian thought, reaching an agreement with a counterpart is a sign of rank. It's a sign of propriety. It's a sign of lead. Senior officials from the United States will go against the wishes of the leadership of Greenland to Greenland because President Trump says that's going to be ours. That is vulgar, is the word. The United States should not use this kind of bullying approach. Every country in the world, all the leaders of the world see the United States acts like a bully. When it comes to the Ukraine war, I attribute this war to 35 years of U.S. unipolar action. The U.S. promised no NATO enlargement. It made NATO enlargement. The United States unilaterally abandoned the anti-ballistic missile treaty. The United States refused to commit that it would not put missile systems in Ukraine. This was one of the major reasons for war. By the way, the war could have ended on April 15, 2022, with the draft agreement, and Boris Johnson and the U.S. officials went to Ukraine to say, don't agree to neutrality. Boris Johnson later said this is a war to preserve and protect Western hegemony. The U.S. views China's sea lanes as a point of vulnerability for China, or what they call choke points. It enters into new military alliances such as AUKUS. It tries to bring India into an aggressive relationship with China in the Quad. It does many military provocative things that then feed this cycle. The most provocative element of all of Western policy is vis-a-vis Taiwan. The United States, simply put, should not be arming Taiwan, period. The U.S. should not be intervening in the internal affairs across the straits. Sending armaments more than 40 years after the communique in which the United States committed to phase out the armaments of Taiwan is a huge provocation and a huge danger. Stop the war talk, stop the war mongering, go back to diplomacy and mutual respect. For the last 30 years, Europe basically did what the United States said. Europe needs to be much more autonomous and clever in its foreign policy now. Truly ending the war in Ukraine is to Europe's huge advantage. I recommended to the European leaders, don't go to Ukraine, go to Russia, go to Moscow to end the war. Then peace will come to the European continent. Europe should reestablish normal relations with Russia, reopen pipelines, and reestablish economic relations. And Europe should engage with China. Europe needs to open its trade more with China, not to restrict its trade. This will be the source of Europe's economic recovery and its prosperity.